Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a highly charged broadcast from Sky News Australia to really decode their overarching narrative. We are going to look at how these commentators managed to weave seemingly completely unrelated events. I'm talking everything from a devastating national tragedy all the way to royal tabloid gossip into one very specific, highly calculated picture of modern Britain. To make sense of this pretty massive jump in topics, we've organized our analysis into four main themes. We'll cover migration and political tragedy, media and culture wars, the royal family snubs, and finally, Prince Andrew's controversies.
All right, let's hit Section 1, Migration and Political Tragedy.
Sky News starts their narrative with a truly harrowing story, the fatal stabbing of 18-year-old Henry Novak. Now, according to the hosts, this tragedy was compounded by what they described as a shockingly dismissive police response. The broadcast claimed that as the injured young man bled and told officers, "I can't breathe," police allegedly responded with disbelief, supposedly based on false claims that he had been racially abusive. The hosts aggressively framed the resulting public fury as the UK's George Floyd moment.
To really anchor this narrative, the broadcast brought in a provocative international perspective. They used a quote from U.S. vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, who directly linked the tragedy to mass migration and what he called the politics of self-hatred among European elites. So you can see how the Sky News hosts utilize this American viewpoint to essentially validate their own local political frustrations.
And this is where the stark political divide really shows up. On one hand, you have UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer officially condemning Vance's comments as divisive. But the Sky News hosts, they firmly pushed back. They declared Vance's assessment spot on. They argued that questioning mass migration shouldn't be dismissed as a far-right talking point, but rather an everyday concern, and they heavily criticized the progressive left for trying to shut that conversation down.
Moving right along to Section 2, Media and Culture Wars.
The broadcast highlighted a very specific recent incident involving the BBC and Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Following the Novak tragedy, Farage called for a measured, focused response, what he explicitly termed pure cold rage. However, the BBC went on air and misquoted him as saying white cold rage. Now, the Sky News hosts argued that this error wasn't harmless. They said it effectively painted Farage as a white supremacist in the eyes of the public. According to the broadcast, this wasn't viewed as just a simple typo. To them, it was weaponized incompetence. The commentators hammered home three core arguments. First, the misquote was inherently damaging. Second, they pointed out a supposed irony, saying that when leftist media misrepresents a conservative, it is somehow always negative. And finally, they expressed real outrage that British taxpayers are footing the bill for a broadcaster that they believe is actively pushing a woke agenda. Okay, the culture war discussion then took a slightly surreal turn. The host shifted to a report about the Bank of England considering axing major historical figures from its currency. Why? Well, market research supposedly suggested these figures presented a backward-looking vision that was elitist and divisive. You can imagine the hosts had a total field day mocking the absurdity of this. They contrasted the potential removal of globally significant figures. Think Winston Churchill, who helped defeat the Nazis, Alan Turing, the legendary codebreaker, and iconic author Jane Austen. And the proposed replacements? A frog, a beaver, or a fox. Seriously. For the commentators, this was the ultimate proof of a selective moral blindness, arguing that the left is fundamentally embarrassed by Britain's own history. All right, let's switch gears entirely for Section 3, the royal family snubs. The catalyst for this royal segment was actually a really joyous family event, the recent wedding of Prince William and Prince Harry's first cousin, Peter Phillips, to NHS nurse Harriet Spurling. The host noted that the royal family was out in full force, all smiles for the big occasion. But as you might expect, the focus was entirely on who wasn't there. The hosts absolutely relished the absence of Harry and Meghan, whom they explicitly dubbed Mr. and Mrs. Grifter. Adding a little insult to injury, Harry's cousins Beatrice and Eugenie were front and center at the event. The broadcast painted this vivid picture of Harry sitting in his Montecito mansion, miserable and isolated, while offering absolutely zero sympathy. Their final verdict? He has no one but himself to blame after releasing his tell-all memoir, Spare. Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, Prince Andrew's controversies. To really understand their frustration with the prince here, we first need to define a term, peppercorn rent. This is a very low, purely nominal rent paid just to keep a legal lease intact, so effectively making the property rent-free. And this is the exact arrangement Andrew reportedly enjoys for his massive 30-room Royal Lodge mansion in Windsor, which is locked into a 75-year lease.
So, why were the hosts so fired up about this? Well, it turns out Andrew has reportedly been subletting 3 cottages on that exact same estate to make some cash on the side. The commentators found this deeply, deeply inappropriate. Here's a man who stepped back from public life amid very serious, ongoing sexual allegations and highly publicized links to Jeffrey Epstein, which we should note he denies. Yet, he is still finding ways to personally profit off properties situated right within the royal ring of steel. As one host flatly put it, they are officially done with Andrew.
The broadcast then wrapped up by analyzing some very peculiar recent photographs of the prince. Paparazzi captured images of Prince Andrew driving his Range Rover, sporting a highly visible shiner, a large, dark, bruised face.
The hosts ran through this wild, almost comedic list of speculations. Was it a medical procedure? Did he fall off a horse? They even jokingly asked if he tripped over his infamous collection of teddy bears. But then, they pivoted to a much more cynical theory. They pointed out that Andrew didn't hide at home. Instead, he purposefully drove his car on the side where waiting cameras could perfectly capture the bruising.
Ultimately, this leaves us with a really fascinating final thought derived directly from the broadcast's analysis. In the highly orchestrated, carefully managed world of the royals, are even accidents utilized to send a message? Was this just a genuine medical mishap? Or, as the commentators questioned, was this a calculated move by a disgraced royal desperate to play the sympathy card? It for sure makes you view those tabloid photos in an entirely different light. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the narrative behind the news.